what Paul says, are we seeking to people please or God please? And to people please can cripple them, can cripple us. To care for people is not necessarily the same thing as pleasing people, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I know that.
I think we tend to collapse them.
And I think they're very easy to collapse.
Why is that?
Well, because oftentimes saying no is uncomfortable in the moment. Mm-hmm. It's kind of, we trade the pain of the short term for the long term, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So like I don't want the discomfort of saying no right now. But what happens is there's discomfort later, I think of that even, I have a toddler, and I have to say no to a lot of things that would be way easier, less tantrums, less resistance in the moment if I just said yes. Yeah. But what does that do in the long run? And
that isn't easy.
Right.
Again, no and even yes, those are easy words, but how to use them, when to use them for the right reason, I'm not saying it takes a degree in rocket science, but it's easier in some ways said than done, right?
Yeah, and I think like even in thinking about having this conversation, I was struck by the nuance of it.
Oh yeah, I thought you were going to say I should have said no.
Yes, right? Yeah. Probably, but it's I think it depends on the person. Yeah. It depends on the moment. So there's not this like sweeping rule about when to say yes and when to say no. And so I think we want those sometimes, because that would be easier.
Yeah, it's again, I'm looking forward to this conversation next week so I can keep learning how to do this. Yeah. And so are there other areas besides what you've already articulated on where saying no may be an act of generosity? Maybe it's in our spiritual lives, our vocational lives, our family life, which you've alluded to some of these, but just any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one thought that came to mind was I remember this old like product thing that Apple did. When they were talking, it was like a product launch, with Steve Jobs and the turtleneck, and they did this video where they were talking about the decisions that they made when they were making a product. Mm-hmm. And they said that we have to understand as an organization that when we say yes to one decision, we're saying no to every other option, right? And I remember thinking about that as somebody who at the time kind of struggled to say no. Mm-hmm. And realizing that when I was saying yes to something, then that was cutting off my ability to say yes to other things.
Was that liberating? It was. Yeah, because you're thinking, actually, I'm doing it all the time anyway.
I'm doing it all the time.
So it's not so hard. Cause, right. Yeah. And I think, if we don't aim at something, such as like learning how to deal with that well, we're going to always miss the mark, or we're going to, if we don't aim at the bar, I don't know what's that old saying, is it you're going to hit it every time? You're not gonna hit it? Yeah. I can't remember those sayings, but just on that matter of learning how to think through that all of our decisions require, when we say yes to something, we're saying no to other things.
Right, and to make some space for that. Mm-hmm. I also think about like leadership, when I say no to something, an opportunity, who else could come along? Who does that make space for? Yeah. So thinking about also opportunities to allow other people their voices or perspectives to shine. Yeah. And thinking too about even relationally, if somebody asks me to do something and I feel like I can't and I say no, maybe that allows for someone else to step up and do that.
Yeah, I think our Messiah complex tendencies, we think we have to do everything, and it's like, well, actually, I think God limited us for reasons to make sure that community is a part of our lives.
For sure.
And, the body of Christ is there for a reason. Yes. The hand needs the foot, who needs the eye, who needs the ear, etc. So, but I think we easily think, and sometimes want, whether we admit to it or not, to really try and do it all. Right. And that's not healthy.
Right. And I think that makes me think of another piece. I remember becoming a mom and a parent. I like my job. Like, I really like my job, and I like my work, and it's good. Like, it fits with my values. It feels like a calling. And so I remember that I was feeling like I was having to say no to something that is good.
Yeah.
To say yes to something that felt more important in that moment. And I think that's another reason why saying no can be difficult is oftentimes we're saying no to things that are not like cut and dry, good and bad.
Yeah, it could be good and gooder.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, so that can be difficult too.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's saying not now or not in that way, or you know, then no has to shift in some way.
Yeah, and so there's nuance to it, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a hard and fast no at every turn. Sometimes it is.
Right.
Jesus with his temptation in the wilderness, it wasn't like, well, maybe later, Satan.
Right.
You know, it was like, no, not now, not ever, never. So, yeah, very good. So, it's also important for us to figure out